and welcome to the Raw Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilbourn from WhatCulture, joined by the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, to look ahead to tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick to look ahead to tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. Before we do that, though, as you can probably tell, we are not in the same office together. We're all working from home now due to the current state of things in the world. So I'll start off by asking, what's it like for you, Dadley Boyz? Michael Hamflett, why don't you start us off?
I'm mourning not seeing you every day, mate, because this has been an absolute treat. Last week, without that beaming smile of yours once a day, I couldn't care. I think I fell into Sidgwick zone with WWE. I looked at it, I felt sad, I felt depressed, I just felt disappointed. And now I'm looking at you, and I suddenly think, oh, Raw will be all right again. Working from home is hell, but other people have it worse. So that's not as much as I'm allowed to say, isn't it?
Yeah, this is obviously a first world problem. I'm still pretty annoyed by it, to be perfectly honest. I think I've heard my kid have 3 meltdowns, my oldest kid, 3 meltdowns so far, and the youngest is on 4. I'm trying to get to work. I need ambient noise. I'm not very good with headphones in, so I feel like it's too intense. I need ambient noise, so maybe a pop in one side of the office is quite good, or, you know, some background radio. Not tantrums. Not tantrums.
Well, anyway, let's get on with talking about tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. I suppose the headline news, Brock Lesnar is set to return. Sidgwick, what do you reckon he's got in store for us tonight?
I think Wilbourn, I think he might stand there and do nothing as Paul Heyman cuts a promo on his behalf. But being less flippant about it, I do think Paul Heyman has got he's in the WWE bubble, as everyone in that company is mostly. He's been there for a long time. He's in fact blowing the bubbles now because he's in creative control of Raw. But I'd like to think that Heyman's always got this sort of outsider appeal. And what I mean by this is that hopefully he's not going to be one of these weird robots who's just like, Raw's the same. Raw's exactly the same. It's not. It's really weird. And I think hopefully he's got the nous and the wherewithal to acknowledge that. He's gonna summon Drew. I don't necessarily know how this is going to manifest, but I like the idea of them getting physical. It's one of those new world differences where previously I'd have liked them to have withheld any kind of physicality, but now that we've just got this weird empty gym era, the sounds they can make, slapping and chopping and punching each other, that appeals to my ghoulish nature. Hamflett?
Well, it's funny you went with sort of violence between men, because I was thinking about how Brock's going to have absolutely nobody to fight other than Drew himself. They're not going to want to throw bodies in like they normally would or do that boring security pull apart because they actually physically can't. He's really good at destroying objects. He could throw a car door into the audience and actually not hurt anybody on this Raw. He could break apart the Performance Center himself more than Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa did. I'd quite like to see him wreck the gym. He smashed up Triple H's office, and I got quite a kick out of that when he went to Titan Tower that time. I'd be absolutely fine with him and Paul Heyman with nobody around to beat up to vent the fury, because the last time we saw Brock, he was decked by Drew, wasn't he? So he can express his cowardice by not wanting to challenge him again. But I just want to see things get broken. Not just how The Undertaker tipped the table, but I want to see more of the Performance Center getting smashed to bits. I need something outside of that awful dead zone that is the wrestling ring.
Well, before we get on to the next point, I was going to say, they can't keep smashing the Performance Center up because they need to have the gym. People need to train there. But ultimately, they don't. No. They just built their own gym, so AEW couldn't have one. So these guys can all wrestle and go to another gym. They're not signing, Tony Deppen, who's really good at pro wrestling. And it's you need to learn how to work. It's just a cover story for a horrible, insidious corporate capitalist tactic. What I'm getting at is they don't need a gym. Just destroy the gym and everything will be absolutely fine.
What I'm pitching is the WrestleMania arena getting broken up just 2 weeks before the show itself. It's even braver than taking the top rope off before a Royal Rumble.
Indeed.
It's going to be very interesting, though, because it's less than 2 weeks away from WrestleMania now. We've heard all the reports about them taping the matches later on this week. So it's going to be intriguing to see how they handle that tonight, obviously. Also, obviously, with 2 weeks out, normally you'd expect a brilliant promo from Paul Heyman, putting over Brock Lesnar's opponent, but also simultaneously saying he has no chance. One thing I thought they could do is Claymore Paul Heyman. What do you make of that?
I'm game. I'd like to see it. Paul Heyman is ideal for a situation like this because he can talk and talk and talk and talk. And it doesn't matter if he's not got the reactions of the crowd because he'd be popping people on Twitter. You'd probably be able to hear the laughter in someone's headset from a production assistant or something like that. So he creates enough heat that Drew McIntyre will get the imaginary pop. I feel like I'm talking about like my wrestling figure promotion when I was a kid and how like the imaginary crowd went wild when I pulled off the heel turn of the year. Like it's how Tony Khan's built a promotion. And I just think that they can get away with that with Paul Heyman being one of the few guys that will generate some kind of a response. Like the idea that somebody on a headset, as we heard last week when The Undertaker was in the darkness saying, I'm in place, like somebody laughing on a headset at Paul Heyman getting his head kicked off is quite a nice and again, quite unique visual that will only ever apply to this particular time.
Hamflet, I've got a question for you, obviously. You bring Tony Khan into this. Has your wrestling promotion adjusted to the empty arena era better than my favorite promotion?
I'll let you know when we know that Tully Blanchard and Jake the Snake are definitely alive for next year.
Okay. Well, Jerry Lawler's not there.
One of the other big things to look forward to tonight is, of course, Randy Orton's response to Edge. He was challenged to a last man standing match last week on Monday Night Raw. You sense it's going to be an acceptance from Randy Orton, but I think he's akin to the way Bray Wyatt turned SmackDown a while back when he's cutting a promo with Cena into sort of a Pinteresque play. I feel like Randy Orton cutting a sadistic voices in my head promo could work quite well tonight.
I guess so. The thing about Randy Orton, and I know Ben Roy Turner is listening intently as we speak, is that he's got a particular delivery where you couldn't imagine it existing in any other context except for the overproduced, like the cadence of the way in which he talks, like the pauses. It's all got this melodramatic soliloquy bent to it. Like he couldn't cut an unscripted promo and have it be fire and stare down the lens. It's just he's purpose built for this WWE system. And the problem for me with these empty arena Raws is that they're so faithful to a WWE system that cannot do by default an empty arena that I'm worried I'm going to cringe at what Randy Orton has to say, which is such a shame because this program so far has been like far and away the absolute best stuff WWE across NXT and the main roster, in my opinion, has produced all year. Orton is, I think it's going to get a bit amdram for me. What do you think, Hamflet? Team Stamford.
I don't want this to become a trope of these empty arena Raws, but if not Byron Saxton, I would say maybe another commentator's getting an RKO. Like maybe Jerry Lawler, actually. Like Orton can be so shocking, and he used that term in the WWE scripted sense. I agree with you. I don't think he's the guy, nor have they got the dialogue to make this one work as well as maybe Paul Heyman or someone like that. But an RKO still looks good as a visual, and him hitting it on somebody when he said his piece to Edge, because that's what he's done so far, isn't it? He's hit RKOs. He's not going to hit a concerto in an empty gym until WrestleMania itself, when he's going to hit a concerto in an empty gym. So that's their big visual for Randy Orton. I feel sad more than pretty much any other WrestleMania program that this has been consigned to this particular fate. I feel sorry for both the wrestlers, for the build, and for Edge especially. And I actually don't blame Randy Orton terribly for him probably having the least exciting night so far of this build.
Sidgwick, you mentioned there about cringing watching Monday Night Raw, something I'm sure everyone is used to. But myself and Andy Murray, when we were reviewing Raw last week, just could not get over the way that WWE are presenting Becky Lynch in this feud with Shayna Baszler. They seem to think, having her arrive on this truck with her face on and then say, I'm going to hit you like a truck at WrestleMania, makes her the coolest person ever. Is this them thinking that? Or is it actually, as I'm hoping, although it's, hoping against reasoning here, that they are crafting this wonderful storyline where Becky Lynch is starting to believe her own hype?
The thing is, they've already crafted this with the meme shades ahead of the Asuka match, and then she defeated her. She had Asuka's number after a year, and then she got humbled by Shayna Baszler. That was the point in the story in her character arc to get serious, because now that she's underplaying Shayna Baszler's threat with the jackets and the trucks and the props, it just feels like you're doing a disservice to this like looming threat on your immediate horizon. Like, if you're not scared, why should I be scared on your behalf? Where's the tension? Where's the conflict? If it's just a match you're sure as hell you can win, then why am I going to watch it? Obviously, you can't act too scared. You're a babyface, but there's a way to balance these emotions to the point where you become a more rounded out performer, and ideally you can emulate accurately a human being. Can I just take a victory lap very quickly? I wrote in the immediate aftermath of the neck biting angle an article that you can go up and visit on whatculture.com/WWE. You'll have to scroll down because it was a while back, but hey, there's lots of great content in the meantime. I wrote an article entitled, "This is the same mistake WWE makes every single WrestleMania season." And I goddamn predicted that after the neck bite, they can't just get over a submission move, because that's boring. That's wrestling after this big, stupid sports entertainment bollocks. I predicted vehicular stuff, and we saw a big, massive truck going into the Performance Center. We would have seen more of it. It would have been the Bex Express if it wasn't all consigned to this Performance Center. So, yeah, I knew it was going to get stupid, and it is getting even stupider than my stupid, cynical head predicted. This stuff is absolutely woeful, and they need to get it way more intimate and brutal feeling, and where better, ironically, than this Performance Center with which to do just that.
What did you make of Becky coming down to share a beer with Stone Cold as well?
I mean, it was all right. I thought it was a noble failure of a segment from beginning to end in Steve Austin. At least he put her over, other than actually selling a Stone Cold Stunner for her. I thought it was a ringing endorsement of her, and they've done that with her and The Rock, and they've done it with her and John Cena, and they've not done it with Triple H. Everybody that has the comfort and security to put her over has done just that. So that was that very WWE torch passing sort of thing. I was ready to put Sidgwick over for his truck tape before he did such a magnificent job of doing it himself, but I'm glad he's been I'm glad he's been sitting on the Bex Express for a week. That must have been absolutely torturous.
Top of the head I came from.
The truck. Last week, I still think WWE are mourning the fact that they've spent thousands on a truck when what they wanted to do was plow it into an ambulance, just like Hulk Hogan did with the NWO. And then they can't do that now. So all they've had to do is park it and throw the keys to somebody. They'll be more devastated than anybody that haven't got the full use out of that truck. So I'll be amazed if we don't see that virtually every week. They haven't even got a road to WrestleMania. It's the Performance Center car park, but she'll drive up and down that at least once a week until they get the money back on it. I saw a pitch on Twitter where somebody who was far more creative than WWE will choose to be with WrestleMania, that because of the change in venues, where multiple venues allow for multiple different settings for different matches, a bit like sort of a Street Fighter single player game where you go through place to place and you've got to take on all the different matches. And somebody pitched something akin to a Lion's Den for Becky Lynch and Shayna Baszler. And it just makes you think, why not? She won the Elimination Chamber by calling herself the Cage Fighter. They pretty much already made a T-shirt based on that she is the Cage Fighter Shayna Baszler. I feel like they could lean into that, and it's something different to look at. It's something different to promote on Raw. And really, this should be applied to every single match for what it's worth. But this one sticks out the most. I think if there was any that they could put them in steel or put them in something a bit more unique to their storyline, it would be this.
Unquestionably. Talking about developing storylines, what do you see next for Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins? I really liked Kevin Owens talking about them coming back to the Performance Center on Raw.
What my favorite thing about this Performance Center development is that I was talking at length in like the old world about how sick and tired I was of seeing the Viking Raiders, the AOP, Murphy, Street Profits, Owens, Joe, Big Show, like all of these different people working iterations of the exact same match. You've got all these moving parts in this, on paper, like dovetailing storyline that just ends up in the same main event every single week that they barely bothered even announcing at one point because they knew it wasn't anywhere near engaging. So I think this should force them to get creative. They can no longer go on the big 4 versus 4 man tags, because ultimately they're doing better at the optics of social distancing. It's going to be completely different backstage, but on screen, the optics of social distancing compared to AEW, WWE's looks a lot better. So I expect that they will not do any kind of like multi-man tag team matches for the sake of it. So, Seth Rollins can half drone on these 20-minute sermon segments on Raw, but like he's a half decent talker. When he can get really annoying, I get really annoyed by him in a way that makes me want to see someone punch him rather than change the channel. Kevin Owens obviously is an expert talker. I think, ironically, given that everyone was sick of them talking and it was just fight, 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 I'd like to see a lot of exposition as to why these two men actually dislike each other. And then I can banter off the idea that they're going to fight in an empty gym and look like a bit of a dickhead and not just too cynical about it.
Yeah, there was a lot of stories over the main roster of NXT that felt like they were going to make use of the Performance Center history because there's now so many wrestlers that have come through that system. And I didn't expect
PWG, but
I didn't expect it to be Owens and Seth, but I'm quite glad they did that. I thought Owens' promo was the highlight of Raw last week, and he's told that story about Seth Rollins effectively saying he wasn't ready for it and he wasn't in WWE shape and all that stuff. He told it on his DVD, and they alluded to it in the very first segment when Seth turned. He was in Chicago dressed in his suit, and they were just in the process of saying, I forget what it was. He said it just said, like, you just show up, and that was the whole line. And Seth having this lingering resentment for the fact that Owens had some success despite looking how he does and not being a CrossFit Jesus, which now plays into this Monday Night Messiah. They found something that I didn't think they'd be able to between them. I didn't think there was any interest left in this program before the Royal Rumble, and yet approaching this weird WrestleMania, I think would be all right with talking or video package that tell these stories, because again, it's WWE, they're the video package company, and there's never been more of a time to make use of that.
Do you think tonight they're going to set up some sort of United States Championship match for WrestleMania? It seems to have been coming for weeks on end, and yet nothing's happened so far, Hamflet.
That match was such a shame last week because it was as if they'd wanted to sell something ahead of the show and then remembered that matches are going down like lead balloons in this environment. So thought, well, we'll just put Asuka on commentary and she can make the noise of 10,000 people. And she did it, and it was brilliant, and she got over, and she's fantastic in this role. But Rey and Andrade became like the sad byproduct of all that. It was easy. It was the weakest Rey Andrade match ever. Of course it was. And it almost made me suddenly want that four-way or a variation of that match that we've been pitching for months not to happen on WrestleMania. It felt a lot like all of TakeOver. I don't want it to exist until wrestling can exist in a proper way again. There are no, in my opinion anyway, there are no moves that Andrade and Rey and Humberto and Angel Garza can do that are going to be remotely received by a television audience in the way they would by a live crowd. The match that all of us fantasy booked with a title on the line simply won't exist in the way we want it to. So I feel like you take one almighty step back from that while you still can and just forget about it until whatever comes in the aftermath of WrestleMania.
Sige?
It's one of those where I'm not as optimistic by default as Michael Hamflet. If they park this match, then they're going to move the building elsewhere, and this is going to stay in a car park forevermore, because as much as we are hugely anticipating the idea of Andrade versus Rey versus Carrillo versus Angel Garza, I just don't think WWE will ever revisit that as a priority. In fact, because it's not like the most gripping story, it's more about the destination than the journey. I'd quite like to see this at the Performance Center, and I'd like to see it set up on tonight's Raw, because the idea of a WWE singles match just isn't working without a crowd in these weird, eerie emulations of a WWE event. I don't understand why they haven't got anyone in the crowd. Maybe it's for the optics of social distancing, but about the only match I can see making sense. Just get Asuka on commentary again and have the four of them just go absolutely 100 miles per hour for 10 to 12 minutes in this Performance Center. I'm constantly distracted during the heat segments or the protracted cell segments that, oh, hang on, there's an audience there. Oh, that means there's no noise. Oh, there's no noise because everything's awful right now. There's just so many distractions that unveil themselves to you when watching these WWE shows. A complete and utter blast of a sprint with so many moving parts and so many different attacks coming from all different directions. I think this is one of the few matches that can work in the context of whatever the hell this is.
I'm intrigued to see what they stick on to fill some time on Monday Night Raw tonight. Maybe the Women's Royal Rumble match, who knows? But one thing that people suggested to wrap up here about filling some time and making it more enjoyable for fans is some more sort of 24/7 championship shenanigans, so to speak. Of course, RTruth just pinned Riddick Moss whilst he was out for a jog yesterday. Is this something then they might actually be utilizing to lighten the mood, although we know how WWE handles comedy, Michael Sidgwick?
If they've got an ounce of creativity about them, obviously optics-wise, they can't do the big horde of all the geeks running after the 24/7 champion RTruth. In fact, I think they forgot about that even before social distancing measures were put into place. If they've got an ounce of creativity, someone, in order to unseat RTruth as 24/7 champion, needs to, on the roof of the performance center, get one of those like nets that they can like pull the rope down and then cover him like he's getting ambushed in the woods, and then string him up in a ball and then cut him back down and then cover him on the floor to win the title. But because he's in a ball, his shoulders won't touch the mat, so they get hoisted by their own petard. That is some wholesome, responsible comedy that I've just thought of 2 minutes before. So let's see what they do with a team of 38 creative writers.
I wanted the Keystone Cops chase scene, but every single wrestler approximately 3 or 4 feet apart to observe social distancing rules. So as much as they want to run a little bit faster, you just see these big gaps of air between each running wrestler, to the point where the only way that they can pin RTruth is the same way The Rock pinned Mankind with a forklift, but in the Performance Center gym. He just gets trapped under a bench or something like that. Just something daft where they don't even get to touch him just by winning the title. But the fact that they've drafted RTruth back in, I think, speaks volumes about how much they want to utilize this belt again, how the success of it, it itself, I believe at the time, was kind of an escape from the rest of Monday Night Raw, whereas now all of wrestling is required to be an escape from everything else. So bringing RTruth back into the fold here, I think, was an inspired decision. And it tells me that it's going to take up quite a bit of Raw tonight. If they can find a way to use, they've been putting old footage on episodes of Raw from like the Royal Rumble and things like that. If they can somehow find a way to splice old footage of RTruth running from the people and just build it in to make it look like the chase is all one consecutive thing. So find the exact people that were chasing him 2 months ago and just have that scene spliced in. Like something just cute like that, because he's a guy that'll get all this stuff over.
Very quickly, we're being facetious about what they can do and going with our own ideas with which to do that. But genuinely speaking, like the weird atmosphere of trying to do a normal WWE show in this completely bizarre context isn't working. I genuinely think the 24/7 championship is the best vehicle they have to making this completely less weird.
Yeah, I reckon so too. Although as much as I really liked all those ideas, they're just going to have someone dressed up as a doctor pin RTruth, so there you have it. Right, let us know your thoughts ahead of Monday Night Raw in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Whilst you're there, follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
Michael's. No, that's not even right. At M. Sidgwick.
It's been a week.
Follow me at Adam Wilbourn. Follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. As I said, we'll be back with the Raw review tomorrow. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching. We will see you soon.